Welcome, everybody. My name is Stephen Kohler. I'm with Audira Labs. Thank you so much for joining us today for our next Audira listening session. I am super thrilled today to welcome our guest. His name is Andrew DeMuro, and he's the Regional Director of Guitars Over Guns here in Chicago. Andrew, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited about our conversation today. I'm going to let Andrew introduce himself in just a moment, but he's such an inspirational leader and leads in so many different ways. He's an incredibly accomplished musician, performer, songwriter, as you'll learn momentarily. He is a teacher and mentor of students and a leader in the community, amongst many other things. And with that, was just really intrigued to learn more about Andrew and his organization and how he's using music as a powerful force to help bring positivity into the world. So with that, Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background, maybe first as a musician, and then we'll transition into your work in Guitars Over Guns.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. And thank you to Harry Davis at University of Chicago for connecting us. Another great
Yes.
leader in the community who I know we both look up to equally and in our own experiences. But really, really happy to be here with you, Stephen, to talk about the intersections between music and the arts, listening and leadership, and really, how they've served me in my experience growing up, and how I use that experience to try and provide a stage for others to share their stories as well. So it's impossible for me to share about my own musical experience without sharing about my first mentor as well, who actually was my music teacher in elementary school, who, when I was in second and third grade, had me in class and listened to us do musical activities as young people. And it was a lot of rhythm stuff, a lot of ta ta ti ti ta, a lot of recorder, a lot of those kind of like early musical experiences that we sometimes think about now and want to pull our hair out thinking about how we must have sounded. But she heard something in me. And I remember her pulling me aside one day towards the end of third grade and letting me know, hey, I'm starting a select choir that's just for fourth and fifth graders. And I want you to audition for it. You're going to be in fourth grade next year. You'll be eligible. And I think you'd be a great fit. And at the time, I told her, in my ultimate 8-year-old wisdom, thanks, but no thanks, because I want to be a baseball player. And if I'm going to be able to play baseball, I need to focus on my energy on that. And singing, it's not a guy's thing anyway. So I wasn't interested. And she, in her infinite wisdom, said, "Okay, that sounds good, thanks. And if you change your mind, let me know." And we went about our business. And then a couple weeks later, she came back to me and said, "Hey, I just want you to know that Robbie Camerino is going to audition for the choir." And Robbie Camerino was my best friend all growing up and later became my first songwriting partner. And she, again, being wise and being clever, thought that a way to get to me might be to convince a friend of mine to join this group. And lo and behold, she was right. I joined what was called the Bravo Chorus in my elementary school. And from fourth grade all the way up until my senior year of high school, never looked back and was never not involved in some kind of select or auditioned music group again throughout my childhood. So I really credit her for seeing that in me and seeing it so early that I was able to grow up in a world where I knew I was musical and knew that I had that strength and frankly that superpower, at least it feels like sometimes, in me to make music myself and to affect change in other people. And so went through all of high school doing music and like wanting to make it part of my life, but not really knowing if it was a viable career for me. And at the same time, I grew up in a household with two parents who were teachers and was in college around the time that the Great Recession happened in 2008 and was really just deciding what I was going to do with my life then. And through some unbiased conversations with my parents and through a freshman year where I changed my major over a couple different times, I ended up deciding that I was going to study education to become a teacher. It was a small decision I made, or at least I felt that I made at the time. It ended up being one of the most pivotal decisions I've ever made. It gave me the opportunity to work in Miami's low income and challenged school communities and see not just the challenges that students face just to get to school in the morning, and of course the disparities that I saw from my own experience growing up in school, but it also excited me to be able to learn and to be able to learn where someone like me could fit and where someone like me could provide value and resource to students who were growing up in different circumstances than I did. And on paper, it probably doesn't look like we belong. Really, listening was the skill that kind of got me in, and music was the skill that hooked them. You know,
Mm.
like when I shared things that I was working on with them with kids musically, they were really interested. They wanted to know more about me. That gave me an opportunity to share about myself, and that gave them an opportunity to learn that there are some parallels and there is some common ground between all of us, and that we have value to bring to each other. And so when I graduated from college, I ended up moving to Chicago to take my first teaching job. And during that time, in addition to teaching and working with students with special needs, I also started a choir after school because there was no music program in the high school that I taught at. And so started this music program. It was a choir, just like the one that I sang in as a fourth grader. There was no budget for musical instruments. So I was like, everybody's got one of these. Just come with your voice. Let's sing, let's talk, and let's build community with each other. And maybe as no surprise to you, what I noticed in that experience was, and watching the group grow from 6 students in the first year to 12 to 18, what I experienced was the best moments that I had with these kids was actually when we were not singing and when we were having conversations about who we are, where we come from, what we want in life, and how this tool of music is either helping us get there or helping us heal through some of the hard times, which we know are common again among everyone from any background. So took that experience and ended up leaving the classroom after 3 years to pursue a career as a musician myself. So I'll probably at some point talk more about the Shades, which is my band here in Chicago. Started with two brothers who I met at the University of Miami while I was there, and was just starting to kind of build some momentum as a musician and build confidence that I could do this as a career and be a gigging musician and a working musician and a songwriter and a recording artist by trade. And during that time is when I really learned about Guitars Over Guns, this program that started in Miami while I was down there as an undergrad, and got some seed funding to open up a region here in Chicago, and sounded a lot like the program that I started at the school that I went to. Of course, it was a music program, but it was about relationships. It was about social emotional development. It was about mentoring, and really how being a musician kind of gives you the skills to excel in any area that you want in life. And that was really appealing to me, especially working with students who had learning disabilities in my first teaching experience. For a lot of them, the arts was a gateway to dignity and to feeling like they had value and worth because their school experiences did not show them that. And so this program was really, really attractive to me in that way. And this idea that musicians can be these change agents and these kind of universal communicators that we all kind of know is true, but like there doesn't seem to be like a formal understanding of that in our society. So ended up working as a mentor with Guitars Over Guns about 3 months after I left the classroom and made this big decision to be a professional musician. And all during that year, I was really focused on two things. I was focused on how do I make this my full-time work? Because at the time I was a part-time employee of Guitars Over Guns and a full-time musician. And the second thing I was working on was going back and forth between Chicago and Los Angeles to be a contestant on The Voice, which at the time I had to keep secret from most people in my life. So I was kind of like traveling sometimes, I was working in after school programs sometimes, and all the while was writing out this job description for what a full-time role for a Guitars Over Guns employee would look like in Chicago. Because at the time we were kind of being guided by the leadership in Miami, which our leadership is dynamic and wonderful, but it's hard to do from a distance. And so ended up writing the job description for the role that I have now. And the moment that I was no longer part of the Voice, flew back to Chicago and started working for Guitars Over Guns full time, and am just trying to use the skills that I learned in the classroom and combine them with my other love, which is music. Of course, the past year has taught us a lot, and stretched the boundaries of what's possible and what our limits are. But my whole life has been about kind of striking balance between those two passions of mine, which are music and education. And I'm really blessed to be able to say I have two passions and to be able to really put both to work in some capacity every day.
So inspiring, Andrew. So many things that you said resonated, particularly your point about, the arts or music providing a path to dignity for those of us that may not have heard that opportunity yet. And that links to, at Audira, we talk a lot about listening and music as a lens for so many things in life. And I'm curious, how have you helped maybe the students that you're mentoring find that voice, right? Through listening to themselves and listening to maybe the communities that they want to serve.
Yeah, well, at Guitars Over Guns, that's a big part of what we do is we help kids find their voice. And one reason I like that language is because it assumes that everyone has a voice of their own. A lot of times we hear about people working in communities that are underserved or challenged and providing a voice for the voiceless. No one is voiceless. That's just not true. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has a story. Not everyone gets to tell their own story. So a big part of what I do with students is kind of to recalibrate their messaging that they've received. And that comes from my time as a special educator. Again, by the time the kids that I taught got to me, they had had so much school experience telling them one thing or putting one label on them or assigning a certain amount of worth to them that they had already started to believe that was true of them. And the same can be said for any marginalized group, that the more you hear a message about yourself, the more you start to believe, well, if I'm hearing it from other people, it must be true. That must be my limit. That must be my ceiling. And a big part of, I think, what makes music special is it is the power of it is limitless. And whether it's writing your own song or performing in front of an audience or, playing your first guitar solo, there's a freedom in music and arts education that opens doors for kids and changes and shifts the way they view their own positioning in the world. And so I don't know if it's anything that I do in particular or any activity that really resonates, but a lot of it is around messaging and around what we say and around how we respond to what they respond with, because it helps us get to know where they see themselves in the world. And a lot of the students we work with are in middle school and in high school, where all of us kind of start to learn what is our identity and who are we and who do we want to be. And when you're growing up in a community that is overlooked or is marginalized, again, that tends to be a limited view of what's possible, even for kids who are brimming with confidence, which many of them are. And so a lot of what I do is around reframing that message for them so that they really believe that this is a gateway, that this is a path for them to go down now and then to be able to make lots of other choices in their future that lead to ultimately where they want to be.
That's incredible.
Which is, I'm lucky to say, like I'm continuing on that path myself.
And what do you notice as the impact as you've helped open up new possibilities for these young individuals?
The impact is far and wide. My favorite, and maybe this is biased, but the thing that excites me the most is that this is our 5th year in Chicago. And so those students who were in 7th and 8th grade when we started the program are now juniors and seniors in high school. And we're noticing a desire in them to mentor. And a desire and an understanding that someone gave this to me and now it's my responsibility to give it to someone else. And that's not something that we push on them. It's not something that we preach. But it is something that we recognize and say, the goal of this, and I kind of say this jokingly to them, but also not really. I'll say like the goal of this is for you to have my job one day. I
Mm.
I I don't expect to be here forever. I expect to play my part and hopefully play it well. But I know that if we're actually doing this right, you know, the people who are leading this program will be the people who have been affected by it. And so, as 16, 17, 18-year olds, if you're already noticing, I have an interest in teaching, or I have an interest in mentoring, or I understand the value of a caring adult in a child's life, they're already on a faster path than I was. I think I realized the value, like I realized that I had adults in my life supporting me, and that's why I had many of the opportunities that I did, but didn't know that I wanted to teach until I had already kind of had a couple years of college under my belt. And so, if they're 4 and 5 years ahead of me already, look out.
Exactly. Talk about positive impact.
Hmm.
And I love this idea that you and your organization, your students are putting into practice of carrying it forward. You had the gift of an amazing mentor. You are now forwarding that. The students you're mentoring are carrying that forward and will mentor others. It's so powerful. What parallels do you see between, let's say, the world of music and leadership and mentorship that folks listening today might be able to take away?
So many. And it's not just music. I think any artistic discipline allows people this capacity to lead. And I think with music in particular, especially during performance, you lead more by what you don't say than by what you do. And that includes body language, it includes nonverbal cues, it includes kind of like physical reactions like breathing. We lead so much by example. And yeah, I tell kids that when they perform, they're doing something that the majority of their peers will never try in their lives, because performance and public display of anything is such a frightening thing for so many people, that just by getting up there and doing something, they have already won. They have already had a victory in their lives that many of their peers will not. And so that bravery, that risk taking, that the confidence just to be able to step up on stage makes you a leader. And then you have an opportunity to show people who you really are. I think that something too that this program has showed me that makes me laugh to think about, but it's not that far off, is just the number of students who off stage are so quiet and reserved, who get on stage and become this completely different person, but also the same person. This is what I mean by like finding your voice assumes that everyone has a voice. They just need something or someone to activate it. And I think that's one of the biggest like points of leadership that I've seen too, is that when kids are on stage, they have this capacity to just like do what needs to get done, or communicate with people, or give that body language, or put that fist up to let them know we're ending the song here. That maybe that's a risk you wouldn't take off stage. So that just, even for kids that I've known for years, they continue to surprise me with the lengths that they'll go to help themselves and others succeed when they're performing.
Mm. It's so powerful. And how many of us have that, maybe that voice in our head that says, I'm not creative, I can't sing, I'm not this, I'm not that. And yet, as you said, the very act of getting on stage, and whether it's one note or 1,000 notes, that's success, right? That's leadership in action, and it's courage, right?
Yep.
And the fact that you and your organization are helping kind of bring that forward is so powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to switch a bit back to your personal past with the voice. Some of our listeners, or I'm sure many of them, would be fascinated by your experience there. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what that experience was like, and many kind of leadership lessons that you took from that.
Yeah, great question. So it was an interesting experience for sure. And frankly, not one I would have sought out on my own. But during this, and when I think back on it, I mean, I don't know what I believe about fate or destiny or anything like that. But I do know that this opportunity was presented to me during the only year in my adult life where I would have felt comfortable taking it. So, during this year that I happened to have left the classroom and hadn't started working again full time for Guitars Over Guns, I got I was going hard for my band and posting a lot of content to YouTube. And one of the emails that I had received as a result of that was from a casting agent on the show, on The Voice, and asked each of the three of us individually, we don't take trios on the show, but would you each be interested in auditioning for The Voice? And when I read the email, I was not interested at all because when I was, I think, like 17 or 18, I auditioned for American Idol,
Mm.
and well, I auditioned for American Idol. So I went to like a basketball stadium in New Jersey where I grew up, and had to show up at 5:30 in the morning. Did a bunch of crowd work and filmed a bunch of stuff for the show. Like when they go like over the arena and everyone says, "This is American Idol," and kind of got like cattle called down to sing. There were two guys on either side of me, and we each stood forward, like they pointed at us, and we stood forward and sang. And the guy to my left was holding a giant toothbrush, and the guy to my right was dressed as the Cat in the Hat. They both got through to the next round, and I didn't. And so I lost a lot of faith in reality TV as a kid, because I was like, wow, this is what it's really about, huh? It's not about singing. And so I got back to the casting people at The Voice and said, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I've done this before and I wasn't satisfied with my experience. And they said, oh, it's not going to be like that. They were like, this is a different type of audition. You're going to go to this recording studio downtown. You'll have a monitor. You can bring an accompanist if you'd like. Prepare two songs, and we're going to listen to you by yourself. And you'll know within 20 minutes whether or not you're going to move on. And so I said, that sounds good. So I actually flew my brother in, who plays guitar, and he was my accompanist. And that day went up to the studio, and they said yes. And I just kept going back until they told me, don't come back. And by the time someone told me don't come back, it happened to be Adam Levine, when there were 32 people left in that season. So I ended up being out in Los Angeles for about 4 months. And you mentioned leadership lessons that I took away. Again, just my positioning in life at that time, I think, kind of spawned what that lesson was for me. I noticed there were two kind of prevailing populations of people in my season around me. There were a group of like 17 to 19-year-olds who their narrative was like, oh, I've been doing this my whole life, and like finally I got an opportunity to sing on television, which, 17 years old, that's pretty amazing. And this other population of people who were older than me, in their mid to late 30s, being like, I've done everything that I possibly can. This is kind of it for me. If I don't make this, I'm kind of throwing I'm throwing in the towel on my music career. And I was 25 and kind of didn't fit either of those narratives. And I also knew, again, like, I was writing a job description for a role that I really thought I was going to get, and knew that if this didn't work out, I had something that I loved waiting for me at home. And there was something about that was so empowering, because I didn't care about the outcome. And I don't know how else to say that, but it didn't matter to me whether I won or not. I felt really fortunate to be there. I felt like I belonged there. And I felt like if it didn't work out for me, it was because there was something better waiting for me. And I will never forget the day that I got eliminated from the show. It was my 26th birthday. My parents were out in Los Angeles because they got to watch, and they took me out for dinner that night. And I still remember my mom saying, well, at least you know now exactly where you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And she was right. So, like I said, I flew back to Chicago the next day, started preparing for our kind of annual mentor training that we do. 9 days later, I was in Miami, like giving workshops to mentors, and the first day of school was a couple weeks later. And so if I had made it any further, I probably wouldn't have made it back in time.
Mm.
And so again, just like, don't believe, I don't know what I believe about fate or destiny, but there is definitely a reason why it worked out that way. And I don't know, I feel like I was a little bit in the minority to be walking away from that experience with really no regrets and having left everything that I wanted on the table, and feeling happy for the people who were moving on, and really not minding that I wasn't.
Beautiful. And what a great lesson in both being grateful throughout, being detached from the outcome, and recognizing how the universe will often point us in directions that we may not have intended, and yet incredibly fortunate, right?
Very true.
And you went on and continue to be incredible mentor to hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals throughout the U.S. Let me ask you this. If I'm somebody listening to this and would like to find out how to get involved, whether it's mentoring or donating or getting involved, how might I do that?
Great question. You can visit us at guitarsoverguns.org on the internet. You can follow us on social media at Guitars Over Guns on every platform: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. There's a couple things in the past that have just happened that I'd love to draw people's attention to. Our mentors and a few students in Miami and Chicago, and a couple of our mentees at our Haven studio in Bronzeville, Cam and Ketchy and Fable. Just the group of them just dropped an album of all songs written during quarantine. And it's called The Rain May Be Pouring, and it's available on every streaming platform. And if you want to get a window into who it is that's teaching our kids and what their music sounds like and what they bring to the classroom, it's a great window inside our world, and a great representation of who we are and what we do. We also host online showcases every third Thursday on Facebook Live that we broadcast through Zoom. Each one is themed. My colleague and bandmate Phil Jacobson is the one who curates all of this, and we have students, we have mentors from Miami and Chicago performing on each one, which has really been kind of a positive side effect of the pandemic, was that our world got a lot smaller and we were able to connect students and mentors in ways that we didn't think were possible before. So those showcases are a great way to connect with us. And our next one is, I believe, on June 10th. We have members of our high school programs in Chicago will be performing. And what else? Yes, of course, you can give, and giving at guitarsoverguns.org is a great way to do that. And if you're interested in mentoring, I'm not 100% sure when this will air, but we have a mentor mixer coming up during the week of May 17th, where if you're interested in being a mentor in either region, Miami or Chicago, you can join us on Zoom, where we're going to have some breakout rooms where you can learn special topics about our work. We're going to have a quick overview about what working for Guitars Over Guns is like, and then we're going to break out into some open mic performances and let people play. So if you're a musician who's interested in working with kids, and one thing that I learned in doing this work is that so many musicians are, they just don't, they haven't been exposed to an outlet that will allow them to do that and thrive in their, many lines of work. So if you're interested in mentoring, that's a great way to get involved as well, is by joining us at our mixer. And details for how to do that will be on social media and also on our website.
Beautiful. And we look forward to sharing that as well. Andrew, as we close out, I'm thinking about, let's say I'm somebody who may not have had the opportunity to work with you as a participant, as a mentee, but I've got this narrative in my head, like, I'm not creative. Everybody's told me I'm awful. What words of wisdom, what invitation might you offer to them?
That's a great question. I would say call me or look to the adults in your life who might have given you that message, and ask yourself why you believe it. Do you believe it because it's in your soul, or do you believe it because you heard it from someone else?
Mm-hmm.
And this is not to paint a negative picture of anyone, but we all go through life, again, internalizing the messages that are sent to us from others. And so for anyone who has drilled that into their own heads, that I'm not creative, I don't have worth, I don't have value, I'd I'd ask anyone to think about where that message came from, um, and why it's so ingrained in your thinking. And then ask yourself, what if you flipped that message on its head? And something I say to our kids all the time is like, we need to stop asking like, why are you failing, and start asking, what do you need to succeed?
Mm.
So there's a way to flip every message to say, well, I'm not creative, to say like, well, what do I love? What do I value? What's important to me? And how do I show it? Because that's really what creativity is, right? It's a display of what we love and what we value and who we are. So yeah, ask yourself, who sent you that message, and how can I flip it on its head so that those people don't own you.
Beautiful. And I would just echo Andrew's invitation to reach out to him, reach out to the organization. As somebody who lives in Chicago myself, I'm so inspired about the work that you're doing just in this town alone, let alone Miami and throughout the world. Just incredible work, my friend. And as part of the music and leadership community and as a fellow mentor, I'm just truly inspired by the work you're doing. We will share all the information that Andrew just posted in our social media as well. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. All the best to you and your organization, and we look forward to continue to support you as you move forward.
Thanks, Stephen. I really appreciate you having me.
Take care. Cheers.